Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend just a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings, the card game. I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Ted Bannock, and I like to go fishing. I'm a fisherman at heart. Did you know that, Dave?
You're like Gollum.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You and him are...
That's a good comparison. We're going to have a great show for you today. I don't know if David's fishing for compliments.
Well,
it was a great show.
I was just gonna compare you and Gollum with your loincloth. You know, like that's Ted. When he goes to the con this year, he's gonna come as Gollum. He's showing up in his little loincloth, and it'll be.
I haven't seen
a Gollum cosplay.
Seen any Gollum cosplays? Yeah, I think it's because people want to like
not
heave
their lunch
clothes.
Do people really want to wear clothes?
Yeah.
Some people don't, but
yeah, I think so.
Not the Lord of the Rings community. The Lord of the Rings community is pretty good about keeping their clothes on.
So we're gonna have it's gonna be a fantastic show, and I'm super excited.
Yeah, that was a little bit longer intro than we're normally used to, so I will quickly.
Yeah, definitely longer, and not unlike the other introductions.
Yeah.
That we get into.
I know. Very quickly, here's how you can stay involved in the Card Talk community. There's lots of ways that you can stay connected with us. Of course, you're listening to the pod or you're watching us on YouTube, but Matt over at the blog every week reviews the same card that we do at the pod. So if you don't want to listen to Ted give weird entries and me make you think about...
I don't know why anyone wouldn't.
If you don't want to think about Ted in a loincloth, then maybe you'd rather read about cards that we review. So go ahead and check out the blog, cardtalk2018.com. And then we also have our playthrough series where Micah is going through and just plays a scenario with certain deck restrictions, and he puts it out there. So
because occasionally we play with cards that we talk about.
Occasionally we do.
Occasionally.
I know. At some point, we're going to get through all the cards and not have to worry about whether we have talked about the cards that we played through. No, not worry about playing with the cards that we've talked about because we've talked about all of them. Actually, it's funny because I build decks now and I'm like, oh, we talked about this card. We talked about this card. We talked about this card. We have something like 350 cards that we've talked about. Like one for each day of the year.
That's a decent chunk.
Yeah. Ted, before we talk about today's card, I want to bring you back to my childhood in upstate New York, near the Adirondack region of New York.
Of course.
Yeah, and so I grew up there. I was born there, and there's lots of lakes around there, and one of them, actually, no joke, is named Long Lake.
Oh.
And whenever I think about today's card, I think about Long Lake. So, if anybody out there is from that part or visited that part of New York State, let me know. Let me know how it's doing up there. Long Lake. It's been about a year and a half since I've been up there. So, Long Lake is just brings back a lot of happy childhood memories.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah. So, now that I've edited that part out of the podcast, tell us about the card today, Ted.
So today's card is Long Lake Fisherman. I'm on a streak of trying to do things off memory, so we're going to see how this one goes as well.
Yeah.
It's a 2-cost spirit ally who's got 1 willpower, 1 attack, and no defense.
So far, so good.
2 hit points.
2 hit points.
Is traded Dale.
Just Dale, yeah.
Just Dale, sweet, okay.
Has a response.
After you play Long Leg Trader from your hand. I'm looking for your approval.
I'm nodding. I'm
okay.
shaking my head.
Oh,
That
okay.
is not correct.
Oh,
And I say that because
after he
it
enters
matters.
play.
Yeah. It's an enter play. It's not a play from hand ability.
Yeah. So after he enters play, you get to. I guess it's not exactly. You get to you name a card cost.
Okay.
You name a number,
right?
And then you're going to. So it's going to be a numerical. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess 6.
7.
It doesn't. You could.
Right.
You could name that. Right. You then search the top 5 cards of your deck.
So far, so good. Yeah.
And you get to take that card. You get to take one of those cards if it has the correct number you named, and you get to put it into your hand.
Right. And then lastly, you always have to do a thing. Shuffle your deck. You always shuffle your deck whenever you any searching abilities. You always shuffle your deck afterwards. Yeah, that was very good. And the only thing that tripped you up is that it is an enter play ability as opposed to a play from hand ability, which just very quickly I can say that enters play doesn't matter how he comes into play. It's just that he did. You can sneak attack him or
I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and read it for real. It's after he enters play, name a number, then search the top 5 cards of your deck for a card whose printed cost is equal to that number and add it to your hand, shuffle your deck.
Right. So that's fine. I mean, you got it all right. That's what I acknowledge. I'm just telling you the difference. I'm telling everybody out there the difference between an enters play ability and a play from hand ability. Is.
And I honestly thought that you had to pay for him because there was a point in the game where they made effects like you have to play this card, you have to pay its cost and play it from your hand. But Longleg Trader actually says after he enters play. Right. So you could in fact use a card like Sneak Attack that takes an ally from your hand and puts it into play, and you would get to trigger his effect. Then he goes back to your hand, and then you could play him again. So if you find ways to return him to your hand, or you kill him and then you bring him back, you get to trigger his ability each time, which is cool.
Right. You don't just have to pay for him and have him come. That's when it play from hand means you pay his cost. You pay the 2 costs. Enters play means you get him into play by some other means other than paying his cost.
Yeah. So his value immediately went up in my book because I forgot that part about him, even though I do frequently play him. So do you put him on the table much, David?
I do every once in a while.
Okay.
You know, he's got 2 hit points, so you can, you know, he's not horrible once he gets out there. You know, obviously you're playing him to dig through and get attachments into your hand, or I guess, you know, not attachments, but cards into your hand.
It's any card.
Any card. Yeah. So, like, you know.
Any card value, I should say.
I will tell you, again, when I play solo, it's hard for me to, you know, build a more, like, a janky deck. It's not that you want everything to cost the same. You don't want everything to cost 1 or everything to cost 2.
Well.
But, you know, like, building a deck where you have, you know, a lot of 1s and 2, you know, mixed in, and probably those cards you don't care if you get, you know, as much. You probably are really searching for the 3 and 4 and 5 cost cards that are going to make a difference in your game if you're going to use this guy's ability. So,
well,
you know,
I mean, let's talk about that, right? So I think this guy is great. So he is Dale traded, right? So he fits into the Dale archetype for a couple of reasons.
Right.
He has Dale printed on this card.
Yeah.
Yep. He's Spirit, right? Which one of the main Dale heroes. Brand.
Yep.
Brand. I lied. It's Bard. Brand is the leadership one.
It's hard. It's hard to keep those guys.
Bard's his son, the Spirit one. But he'll fish you out for that archetype to function. You want attachments, right? And so if you know you play a lot of attachments in your deck and a lot of them cost 1, you can be like, oh, okay, like I'm just going to name 1 and I can fish out my helmet, my armor, you know, my weapon that cost 1. And that's great. And then you play it on the Dale and then you draw a card and they get the willpower boost and all that jazz. But this guy is just, he's card draw, just like built into an ally. And not only is he card, he's card search. So he does have the chance to miss, right? Because you could say, I named 2. and then you search the top 5 and then you feel bad because everything is 0 1 1 1 5 or whatever, right?
Right.
Like, but I think when you're building the deck, I haven't looked at maybe like Rings DB to see statistically how decks are made, but there's going to be a cost curve to your deck, right? And I think when you put it together, you're going to kind of know, like, wow, my deck is built around this cost curve of 2. I'd say, and that's generally, right? I think because even if you're playing a deck that's 2 spheres, right? A 2 cost card, if you have 2 spirit heroes, you can play the turn you draw it. Or if it's your off spear, you can play a 2 cost card within 2 turns, right? Within 1 turn of drawing it. So I think there's some math and deck construction stuff there, but you're going to kind of know. And especially if you're searching for a specific card, you're like, man, I really want my, my Steward of Gondor because that card is strong, right? That Steward of Gondor, in order for it to be good, it's got to be where, Dave?
It's got to be, it's got to be in your hand. It's got to be on the table.
Exactly.
Yeah,
doesn't do any good in your deck.
You have to draw it.
So if I have a lot of decks that are just like, okay, the deck doesn't need this card to function, but boy, is it good when it comes out. And so I use this ally to get it. I'm like, okay, I have and you want to have several targets, right? Like, well, all the attachments in my deck, like most of these, just cost 2. Unexpected courage, and and my Steward of Gondor, and like holy, and then you have 2 cost allies. Or even if you're playing leadership and your deck costs more and you're looking for a certain 3 cost card, it's strong. It's strong to be able to go and get it. I have had it miss though. I will be honest about that.
Well, it's frustrating, right?
Like, you had that. I don't know if you've had that happen to you.
No. I don't play that. I mean, I say no because this card doesn't make it in a ton of decks, right? Like, let's take it from my point of view. Okay, so there are cards that fish out stuff. Okay, and so this fish out stuff. See, that's why it's the Fisherman, because it's going into the long lake and fishing out anything that you want. Like if I am gonna play Raise the Shire or Odo Proudfoot, right? They go in and they get, hobbits.
Right.
And so there's my hobbit search. Yeah, does this replace Odo Proudfoot? No, but it's another like hobbits have a certain, like you were saying, certain cost to them. There's the Weather Hills Watchman that goes and gets a signal, and the King's Return that goes and gets a
guarded card,
and there's the Mustering of the Rohirrim that goes and gets
Rohan, top 10 for Rohan,
a mount or something, and so when I'm building cards, I get that this is another card along that line, and it's doing it by cost,
right?
And it's good because it's not restricted. Like if you're using Odo Proudfoot and you're going to find a hobbit, you may not have a hobbit in the top 5 cards, but if you're going into that same deck and going to find a 2 cost card, you're probably going to have a 2 cost card, right? Like, so, I think that this is just another card in that arsenal. Where this shines is exactly where you said, Ted, in the Dale archetype. You play this, the 2 Dale heroes, one is leadership, one is spirit, and so you have sneak attack, long lake fisherman, go find bring this guy out, go find an attack, go find a 1 cost something, put it into play, draw a card, do all the things, get an extra willpower, whatever it is that all the Dale things do. So this thing is really good for Dale, but I don't know if it stands out in other card archetypes. And that's where I'm, I get it. Like, and we've said this more so recently than ever, is that you want options, right? Like, you just want to have options to be able to get to the cards that you need. And this
Right.
gives you that option. There's, it's not quite word of command or heed the dream,
Sure.
but
You're right.
but the other thing is this is an ally that stays in play,
Yeah,
And
like
so
he's got 1 willpower and 2 hit points.
right.
And he can
and if
jump
it's in a
block
Dale
for
deck,
you.
he gets more
More willpower.
Right. So like, I'm not saying he's useless. What I'm saying is he, in the way that I have always thought about him, has always been under this umbrella of kind of digging out cards, right? Like, I'm sure that this is a great card for, like that Villia deck. You rearrange, you put Stargazer in, you put cards in, you already know what's coming out, so you can put this in, like you can do all that stuff.
Right. Or you're like, I really need to find Villia, so I'm going to name 2 and see if there's a 2-cost Villia in the top of my deck. Or maybe an Unexpected Courage, because Unexpected Courage costs 2, and I like to play it on Elrond.
Right. And Steward of Gondor costs 2.
And you could be playing a mono lore deck with Elrond in it, and he can play this ally.
Right.
Because he can pay for spirit allies.
Right.
So I get what you're saying. But there's definitely a lot of other cards that let you draw cards, that let you do a search type of function. And so, some of those might be stronger in different circumstances. And this card is just great because it's not limited to those. It helps you find literally any type of card, right? Just solely based on the cost.
That's I guess, and I said all of that because that's my point, is that this gives you a way to find cards that's different than the other ways. The other way is find a type of card. This is find a cost of card.
Right.
So,
Yeah, you got, we talked about Ancestral Armor last week, and, I mentioned Open the Armory, right? That searches the top 10 for an item that can be much, or a weapon or armor, excuse me, and that can be much stronger because it's but you have to consider the same thing. It's like, well, how many, anytime you run that type of card, it's how many, even with Odo, how many hobbits do you have? How many weapons and armors? How many, and I think that this guy is just, there's just a common factor, like card cost.
I get it. But
every deck has cards that cost things.
Right. But you're not playing Odo Proudfoot if you don't have a deck that has hobbits in it.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, so if you're playing a Hobbit deck and, 2 out of 5, 40% of them are hobbits, 20 out of 50, then are you playing a deck that, 20 out of 50 of them cost 2? And the other thing is, and this is what I tried to lead with, is that, the cards that you want sometimes aren't the 1 and 2 cost cards. I know we can list a whole bunch of 1 and 2 cost cards that make impacts,
but you could name you could name 4.
Right, absolutely. But
whatever you're trying to find.
So, the impact, like if I'm playing I'll say Sylvans just because I'm familiar with Sylvans and we've talked about hobbits. So if I'm playing Sylvans and I want, a 2-cost Sylvan, a lot of them are Sylvans, I can guarantee you that Sylvan card isn't going to be as impactful as I would want. It's still a 2-cost card and it thins my deck and it does all the things that getting a card is, but it's not, it's still not as good as getting, the 3 and 4 cost cards. I'd rather have Legolas, but I only have 2 or 3 of those cards in my hand. So, or in my deck. So it's a different way to look at card search, but I don't know if it's better. But you are telling me that it's better, but I don't necessarily believe you.
Okay, that's.
I mean, fine, I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just. I'm just saying it's a very Good option for our listeners to consider if your deck, especially if it's like if your deck is really crux around like one or two card, like it's really crucial, you know, this is a great way to find that. If you're like, man, my deck has a really high cost curve, so I need to find that Surdaganda, or boy, I really need unexpected courage on my Baragon so he can do multiple defenses for the quest I'm doing.
Mhm.
It can be a good way to find any type of card that your deck is trying to get, basically.
Yep.
So
Yeah. I mean, I get that. I'm not saying it should be thrown into the fiery chasm from whence it was made. I just think that it doesn't stand out as a particularly much better option than any of the other card searches.
sure, okay.
That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it.
But he's a thematic kind of like home run, though, right?
Oh, absolutely! Like,
because he's a fisherman and he like fishes
right,
like a card out of your deck, and like you might catch exactly what you want, and sometimes you're like, no, there's no fish today,
right?
Because you could just miss,
right?
So
he needs to have one of those really strong magnets in his picture. You know, the magnet fishing that people do. It's like, oh look, I just brought up an ancestral armor. Here you go.
Yeah. So he's fun. He's fun in that regard. And then,
yeah. What about the? I mean, is there, before we talk about the art, is there more to talk about him in terms of him being an ally? We've kind of brushed that over. He works really well in a Dale deck.
Yeah, and
and 2 hit points.
Right. And if you're really digging for cards, like, yeah, he is when enters play. And just don't underestimate that either. Like I said, because if you play him and chump block him, and then you play stand and fight, and then bring him to play from your discard pile or sneak attack. If you end up using Vilya, right, and then he's the top card, you do a blind, and he comes out, and you play him for free, he's going to trigger and draw you potentially a card when you let you search for a card.
Right.
So don't forget to maybe try to take advantage of that, which is pretty cool. But otherwise, yeah, his stats are just kind of meh. His main ability is helping you find a card you need that's more important. Yeah.
It's really funny because Odo Proudfoot is maybe the most analogous. Odo Proudfoot, 2-cost spirit ally, but he's got one willpower, 1 attack, and 1 defense with 2 hit points. And he's also a when enters play. And you search the top 5 for a Hobbit when he comes into play. So it's kind of funny. The Hobbits, maybe that's an indication that the Hobbits need a little more help. So I don't
know. But yeah, that's really it.
He's good in a Dale deck.
Yeah, definitely strong in a Dale deck, like for sure. Yeah. But like, yeah, I've had decks where like, I have a deck focused around Galadriel, and she really wants her ring, right? And I also played her mirror, and I really wanted the mirror to search for even more cards. And I'm like, well, what helps me get both? They're both 1 cost, know. So like, play this to try to get one of those cards. So, it can be, yeah, I think it's a great option for sure.
Yeah.
But looking at his art,
he's a dude fishing.
He's fishing. He's got like a net, and what else do you expect, right? He's on the long lake.
Yeah. I actually like the houses in the background. You can kind of get a sense that they're actually on the lake. They're on pilings, and it's kind of neat. It's kind of neat. It's one of the few cards that has, Lake Town in it. For anybody who doesn't know, or maybe this is the first time and you haven't gotten this far in an episode, we have a highly scientific yet arbitrary system where we ring a card on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is the one card to rule them all, and a 10 is the card that we throw back into the fiery chasm from whence it was made. So Ted, you went first last time, I know, because we just recorded that episode, so I will do this now. I'm not panning this card, but what I'm saying to everybody out there is that I don't think that this card is necessarily, it's not that much better or that different than a lot of the other, card search things, right? It kind of does the same thing. It searches by card cost, not by card type, which is nice. So, like it keeps that Dale deck going, and for that it's strong, but otherwise this card just kind of fits into the, it's a general use card that can fit into maybe some, some decks just to help you look for the one thing, because a lot of decks don't have, a general use card search. So this kind of fits that bill and belongs in the card pool. So, card search is important in and of itself. So, because of that, I'm going to have to give this thing a middle of the road. Like I would say 4 or 5, but because I was grumpy and Ted, you forced me to give it a 5. So like card search is important. So, card draw, card search, getting the cards you need, that's important. You can't do anything if it's not in your hand. So that's where I fall. It's funny that we kind of agreed on this card, even though it seemed like we didn't. That's really funny. I thought you were sure going to give it a 2 or a 3. Okay, well, everybody, let's start again next week as we talk about more cards in the game. Have a great day, everybody.
Do you love the content? Here's what you can do to stay connected. Become a patron. The money collected through Patreon goes into keeping the lights on here at the podcast. We love our patrons, and you can join at many different levels. Visit patreon.com/cardtalk2018. You can subscribe to us, whether you're watching our YouTube channel or you're listening to us in your favorite podcatcher. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications of all our new episodes. Didn't know we were an audio podcast? Find us by searching Card Talk to get access to our 120 plus regular episodes. Didn't know we were a video channel? Find us by searching Card Talk LOTR LCG on YouTube. And there you can find not only our regular episodes, but you can find our bonus playthroughs and other content related to the game. Want to get a hold of Ted, Grant, or myself? Feel free to email the podcast at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.